Hello, my friends. This is Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life, and I want to give today a special message to the people of Kansas. In particular, a message of encouragement to my brothers and sisters there working in the pro-life effort. We have interacted with you in so many different ways over so many different years, and my message of encouragement to you today also applies nationwide, especially as we work together to battle the procedures of abortion that involve the dismemberment of a living child. Dismembering that child, tearing that child limb from limb while the child is alive, so that in the process the child dies, having her arms and legs ripped off, the rest of the body torn apart, and then the head crushed and the skull removed in pieces rather than as a unified whole. A procedure described in various medical textbooks like this one, Abortion Practice by Warren M. Hern, in which he calls this abortion dismemberment, and in many other textbooks, as well as in many court testimonies from the actual people who do them. For us to understand what abortion is, for us to understand what dismemberment abortion is, we don't have to turn to books that we in the pro-life movement write or that the church writes. It is not the Bible that we're quoting here. It is the medical textbooks and the testimony of the abortionists. Well, brothers and sisters, the reason, of course, that we're talking about this to you, the people of Kansas, is that, as you well know, in 2015, then Governor Sam Brownback, who has been a great friend to us at Priests for Life over the years, and to me personally, whom I just recently saw, as a matter of fact, once again at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast, was the first governor to sign into law a law protecting children from these kinds of dismemberment procedures. And I was proud to stand with him as he signed the Kansas Unborn Child Protection from Dismemberment Abortion Act, then in 2015. And various other states since then have both introduced and passed the same kind of measure, and we're grateful to our friends there at Kansas for Life and, of course, National Right to Life for crafting this legislation. It has been adopted by various states and has been introduced at the federal level as well. And all of us at Priests for Life have been and continue to be advocating for such a law, both on the state and federal level. Now, predictably, the people on the other side, the advocates of abortion, have challenged this law in court, and predictably various courts have struck it down. And you in Kansas know this history very well. Right away, the district court stepped in to put a hold on this law, and then it was appealed. The Court of Appeals split right down the middle, 7-7, which meant that the lower court injunction stayed in place. And then, of course, it was appealed to the Kansas Supreme Court, which heard arguments over 2 years ago. In 2017, the Kansas Supreme Court heard arguments about the constitutionality of this a ban on dismemberment abortions. You know, rather than calling it a ban, rather than calling it a restrictive law, we like to talk about it in terms of a protective law. It protects children from this barbaric violence. And more than 2 years now after those arguments were heard in the Kansas Supreme Court, we end up with this document, these 200 pages of a 6-1 decision saying, amazingly, that the Kansas Constitution contains a right to do this, a right to abortion. Now, brothers and sisters, those of you in Kansas know this very well, and because this deals with the Kansas Constitution, and the court is claiming that it is the state constitution that provides a right to abortion, this is not then a matter that would be litigated in the federal courts or brought to the U.S. Supreme Court for judgment under the a question of whether or not the U.S. Constitution provides for abortion. This is a separate line of argument, a separate forum for such arguments, and therefore the only recourse to a very mistaken decision like this is the one that I know so many of you in Kansas are pursuing and that I support you in 1,000%, and that is to amend the state constitution in Kansas. Let me go back, but before I make a comment on this decision, just to thank the Kansans for Life and Sam Brownback, who is now, of course, an ambassador for religious freedom, and he knows intimately what that means: freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, and also the freedom to defend life. I was so proud to stand with him when he signed this bill into law, the Unborn Children Protection from Dismemberment Abortion Act. And then, that was in April of 2015. In January of 2016, we honored him with a special award at our National Prayer Service in Washington, D.C. on the day of the March for Life. And he spoke at that service, and the award was given, my friends, not only to him individually, but to the people of Kansas. We wanted on the national stage to draw attention to your efforts to stop these dismemberment abortions and use it as a catalyst, an encouragement, an example to the other states around the country. And praise God, so many of them have in fact been following your example. You know what's most amazing about this decision in the Kansas Supreme Court is the following: that it quotes from the beginning of the Kansas Constitution's Bill of Rights the following words, and then uses these words as the basis for finding a right to abortion. Listen to these words. All men are possessed of equal and inalienable natural rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I guess when you're talking about the inalienable right to life, it takes about 2 seconds to realize that you can't have abortion. I guess it takes 2 years in a document like this to come to the conclusion that you can. It takes a long time to distort the mind, to contort the reasoning process, if you can call it reasoning at all, that ends up saying that a passage that talks about the inalienable natural right to life can lead to the conclusion that you have a right to destroy life. As the lone dissenting voice in this decision, Justice Caleb Stegall, and I congratulate the justice for having the clarity of mind and the courage and character to stand up and to do the only proper thing here, to dissent from this incredibly wrong decision. He said this, let me quote his words, "This case is not only about abortion policy, the most divisive social issue of our day, it is more elementally about the structure of our Republican form of government. Today we issue the most significant and far-reaching decision this court has ever made. The majority's decision is so consequential because it fundamentally alters the structure of our government to magnify the power of the state." Yes, I agree with the justice very, very much about that, because we're inventing a right out of thin air, the majority is, just like Roe versus Wade did. As you in Kansas know in your history, and it very much corresponds to history that we see around the country, when this Constitution came about back in 1859, just a handful of years later, the Kansas legislature outlawed abortions. And the trend throughout the states was to put more and more protections on the unborn children. And this prohibition on abortion stood for 100 years. while the Constitution was in force. And you mean to tell me only now, in the second decade of the 21st century, is it suddenly discovered that in the Kansas Constitution there's a right to an abortion that was never found before in a state whose legal history had been the protection of the unborn rather than their destruction? Nobody can seriously accept this argument, brothers and sisters. Nobody. I want to read the lame statement that Governor Laura Kelly issued, Democrat governor of Kansas. Governor, you should be ashamed of yourself for this statement. Let me read it. While federal law has long guaranteed every woman the right to make their own medical decisions in consultation with their health care providers, I'm pleased that the Kansas Supreme Court's decision now conclusively respects and recognizes that right under Kansas law as well. End of quote. Governor Laura Kelly, you should be ashamed of this, and your predecessor, Jennifer Granholm, should be covered in shame as well. She, of course, appointed 4 of the 7 justices of the Kansas Supreme Court that made this abominable decision. But one of the reasons you should be ashamed of this statement is that, first of all, it doesn't address the issue at hand. This is not a decision about whether women can make their own medical decisions in consultation with their health care providers. This is a decision about whether it's okay, according to the Constitution of Kansas, to take a baby and pull her apart, one arm at a time, one leg at a time, torso, and then bring the skull out in fragments rather than as a unified piece. Governor, I ask you, have you ever stood next to an abortionist while he or she performed this procedure? Have you ever had to reassemble the body parts of a baby who has been dismembered? Governor Kelly, would you please stop insulting the intelligence of the people of Kansas, and even more so, would you please stop assaulting their moral character, which is crystal clear in its defense of human life, starting when human life itself begins at the point of fertilization. A couple of things about this statement. Abortion has nothing to do with medicine or health care. A medical procedure helps the body to do something that it's trying to do, that it's supposed to do, but is having trouble doing. And so a medical intervention or a surgical intervention will assist the body to accomplish its purpose. Well, abortion does just the opposite. In a pregnancy, the body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, nurturing, caring for, protecting, feeding that child, and then the abortion goes in and stops all that, puts it in reverse. It's like driving a car down the highway at 70 miles an hour and suddenly putting it in reverse. Not to mention the harm that is done to the mother as a result. But this is contrary to the very purpose of medicine. When a medical intervention is made, the first question that has to be asked and the first thing that the medical personnel needs to show is that there's a medical benefit to the procedure they're about to do or the medication they're about to provide. What medical benefit is there, Governor, to abortion? What disease does abortion cure? Or do you put yourself in the category of those who consider pregnancy a disease? You're pretty disconnected from the people that you claim to govern. And furthermore, if you think that abortions happen after a mother consults with her health care provider, think again. This shows you're obviously also disconnected from what goes on inside the abortion industry. There are no rights to abortion, neither federally nor in the state of Kansas, and certainly not in the Constitution of Kansas. Dear people of Kansas, I want you to be encouraged. I want you to recall something that I witnessed during those days of debate before Governor Brownback received the bill to sign back in 2015. Never forget this, because this is a clear sign of why, in the end, we win on this question of dismemberment abortion. And it's reflected here actually in the governor's lame statement. Notice the word that she does not have in her lame statement. Dismemberment. Do you remember that when the debate took place in the Kansas Senate and two senators stood up, Democrats opposing the bill that would protect these children, in debating the bill, in opposing the bill, they couldn't name the bill. Likewise, a press release at that time from Planned Parenthood opposing this legislation couldn't even name the legislation. Now, that's not because either Planned Parenthood or those Democrat state senators didn't know the name of the bill. Certainly they knew it. They were afraid to pronounce it because the very word dismemberment dismantles the whole abortion ideology, because it cuts through the slick and smooth slogans about health care and women's rights and women's choice and the Constitution, whether you're talking about the federal Constitution or the state Constitution. It cuts through all that and brings you right back to the reality of what's going on. They couldn't say the name. And that shows that we're on the winning side. That shows the genius of this kind of legislation. Now, various news reports have told us over the years, they did the same thing with partial birth abortion. Now they do it with dismemberment abortion. They say that, well, we in the anti-choice movement are inventing these terms. Well, you see, you can't have it both ways and say that, well, the legislature should not be practicing medicine. Of course, we're not asking legislators to practice medicine. We're asking legislators to prevent the abuse of medicine. But what the people on the other side want to do is they want to have it both ways by saying you can't practice medicine, and then they complain when the legislature is not using medical terms. And they say, well, there's no such medical term as partial birth abortion in that whole debate. They complained about that. And then in this case, they say, well, you know, what the anti-choice people call dismemberment abortion. Well, let's make something clear. When you're going to write a law, you have to come up with legal language. If in the law you simply use a medical term, well, then people in the medical profession can change the definition of that term and say, well, this law no longer applies. What is a D&E abortion? Dilation and evacuation. Yes, that's used to describe an abortion that dismembers a child. But remember, these laws protecting children from dismemberment are protecting them from dismemberment in the way that the law defines it. So it could go beyond the D&E procedure. In other words, it's protecting them from any procedure, no matter how the medical community wants to name it, any procedure that involves, and let me quote from the law itself. I have the law right here, SB 95, the Kansas Unborn Child Protection from Dismemberment Abortion Act. Let me read this. Dismemberment abortion means, with the purpose of causing the death of an unborn child, and let's focus in here on this diagram while I read this, knowingly dismembering a living unborn child and extracting such unborn child one piece at a time from the uterus through the use of clamps, grasping forceps, tongs, scissors, or similar instruments, that through the convergence of two rigid levers slice, crush, or grasp a portion of the unborn child's body in order to cut or rip it off. That's dismemberment. We're not making up the term dismemberment when it comes to abortion. Warren Hern made it very clear on page 154 of this well-known abortion textbook called Abortion Practice. Let me read for you a couple of parts here. The procedure changes significantly at 21 weeks because the fetal tissues become much more cohesive and difficult to dismember. And then he says a little further down, a long curved Mayo scissors may be necessary to decapitate and dismember the fetus. So if we say in the law we want to stop the dismemberment of these children, And the legal term that we use to describe this as dismemberment abortion, how in the world can the medical community complain? The only reason that the pro-abortion people complain is that they've never seen an abortion that they don't like. But it's Warren Hern that uses the word dismember, and therefore, so can we. People of Kansas, we are with you. We are with you here at Priests for Life. We are with you all across this country. We are with you in exposing the reality of what dismemberment abortion is, because you know what? We've only just begun. We are with you in educating people about how these procedures, which take place under cover of darkness, are violence against these children, not to mention the harm that they give to the moms, the dads, the families, the abortionists, and all our entire society. We are with you in educating people about this. We are with you in standing firm in asserting that what the Kansas Constitution guarantees is, as it says, the inalienable and natural right to life. Not right to abortion, right to life. And furthermore, we stand with you in opposing and exposing this decision. We stand with you, my brothers and sisters in Kansas, in standing with the legislation that has been passed, that it is being passed in all kinds of other states. And again, you led the way, you are leading the way, you have been the example. We stand with you, my brothers and sisters in Kansas, in opposing this decision of the Supreme Court of Kansas and in calling for an amendment to the Constitution that will make it very clear that it in no way provides for the killing of children in the womb. I want to give you this message of encouragement, and I want to give you a blessing. And for all of you everywhere in the country whose states are making an effort to protect children from this, or who could do so in the future, I say let's work together and let's make it happen. Now let me give you the Lord's blessing. May the Lord bless each and every one of you, continue to help you to expose this evil and to protect these children. May He always give you courage, clarity, and joy in this pro-life battle. And may He bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. One final word before we go. There will be, and this is being broadcast on Wednesday the 8th of May, and on tomorrow, Thursday the 9th, Kansas for Life is having a gathering in Topeka from 11 a.m. to noon on the sidewalk bordering 10th Avenue on the north side of the street, the south side of the Capitol, facing the Kansas Supreme Court building. I urge you to go to that rally. I urge you to be in contact with the Kansas for Life. I urge you to get behind the effort to amend the Constitution of the state. Let's make it clear that none of this is permitted under the Constitution, nor should any of this be permitted in law. So again, the rally, Thursday, May the 9th from 11 to 12 in Topeka. Contact the Kansans for Life for more information. This is Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life. Thank you for listening to and spreading this message. And to those of you in Kansas, I look forward to being with you again soon, right there in your own state. Keep up the great work, and God bless you.
But you know what? When you and I take up this call and we talk about abortion, if we speak about it in church, we're told we're too political. If we speak about it in the political arena, we're told we're too religious. If we speak about it in the world of the media, it's too disturbing. In the world of business, it's too distracting. In the world of education, it's too controversial. In the streets, it's too disruptive. So abortion, if abortion is wrong, where do we go to say so? We go into the churches, we go into politics, into the media, into business, into education, and into the streets. Some churches haven't wanted to get involved in political hassles with the government, so they've been on abortion. They didn't